Dan, we need to get some background music going. So we leave jam out while we're waiting. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't need it that bad, Dan.
Yep.
You want to keep going, or?
Silence is better.
So, Paul, I don't think we should punish the people who showed up on time.
Yep. Can we go ahead and kick her off, guys?
Okay.
Away we go. Welcome, everyone. We've got 30 members on, and glad you joined. Before I get started, I just want to encourage you to take a look at your week 2 LMS. It's really cool stuff. It has to do with starting with your customer lens and getting going with the idea of how to interview customers, and we're anxious for you to take a look at it. So let us know if you can't get to it, but otherwise enjoy it. I also want to encourage you to use your Trello board, I guess, for a couple of reasons. One is it's a good place to journal. You can keep this information for yourself, and I think it would be really useful for you to look back on. So I encourage you to use it for that reason. And the other is that Craig especially, checks this Trello board pretty much every day. So if you have any questions or problems or things that are coming up that you need help with, be sure that you're documented on the Trello board, and Craig can take a look at it with you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. You see the outline we've got there. We're going to talk about a nasty little bug called confirmation bias. And then we get to do some cool stuff looking at a customer lens example from one of your Startup Hustle co-members. And then we're going to do a practice customer interview so that you can kind of see what some of the things are that you might want to include in your interview, and how you might adopt parts of it. And then we're going to try to spend a good 20 minutes on chat questions. So write them down if you got questions about this part, especially about the customers. Be sure to write them down and throw them into the chat, and we'll yak about them for the last 20 minutes. So here's the Startup Hustle tip of the week, is to look out for this nasty little bug that I was calling it, confirmation bias. And what this has to do with is simply people hear what they want to hear, is the old saying. And that's what's happening. And you want to kind of look out for that when you're doing your customer interviews. You want to be sure that you are careful about writing down what they say. And try not to interpret it too much, because you might be throwing some of your own bias on top of it. Okay? So that's confirmation bias, something to look for. So now I'm really excited to talk about this next part. We're going to go through a customer lens example from one of our fellow Startup Hustle members, and someone who happens to be a little bit ahead of most of the group. He's met with Craig several times, and I think me once, and we worked on his customer lens. I don't know. I think it was sometime this winter. And he's not done with his Startup Hustle. He's still in it. But he was good enough to agree to visit with us this evening about his experiences, and so far, so that sort of everyone can kind of get a little perspective or insights about working on your own customer.
Here it is.
That's your thing? Cool.
So, Chris, are you on?
I am, yeah.
Great. Thanks for joining. This is Chris Wigginton, and we're going to talk about his startup lens. So, start at the beginning a little bit, Chris. What fired you up to work on a startup?
Well, I guess it kind of helped to go with my background a little bit. So I've worked in the fitness industry for over 15 years. I'm currently working on a master's degree in it. But I noticed something over the long haul in the fitness industry is that there's a lot of highs and lows with people's motivation. And so what kind of motivated me to get a startup going is I wanted to find a solution to this and help people to develop more intrinsic motivation to live healthy lifestyles, but to be able to sustain it across the long run, and not just, for the short run or just, for that quick, look good for the summer kind of deal. But I wanted people to be able to develop lifelong habits of good health.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, you met with Craig early on and probably started working on your desired outcome. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at what I want to ask you about is the process that you went through as you created your desired outcome. I know you and Craig talked at length about what it is that you were wanting to do, and that you created a desired outcome. How did you do it?
How did I come up with the desired outcome statement in
Right.
general?
Yep.
So I think it's something that just took a lot of, well, first of all, I put what I thought would be my desired outcome up in my physical space. And then, I'd see it every time I'd walk into my office and be able to kind of, get some other ideas on what I could do to improve it. And so what it is now wasn't what it was in the beginning. And so what it is now, they create significant and measurable lifelong habits of good health. It came over, talking to my personal training clients and some other clients that I had too. I started a corporate wellness program for a company, and that took off. And just talking to the people that were involved with that, and being able to incorporate things that you might not necessarily think would fit into the fitness industry, like concepts like Six Sigma and those advanced problem-solving techniques. And so I think when I was trained in that, I started to learn how important how important it is to have measurable things, measurable goals along this lifelong process of developing those habits. And so, it just took a lot of massaging, a lot of work to get the problems or the desired outcome to where it is and where I felt like I was pretty happy with it, and my customers would be happy with it too.
Cool. Great. Well, that turned out nice. So then you probably started working on your customer lenses pretty much right after that, I would assume. Is that right?
I did, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's, I'm going to put it up here, and just to show everyone, feel free to take a look around this, everyone. This customer lens, we think looks great. And we happen to know that you've got a number of other lenses that you've built, but this is one of your main ones, right?
Yeah, it is. So, because that's the one that I've been working on the longest. So,
Yeah.
and,
So would you talk a little bit about how did you approach doing this lens? Did you maybe start with the customer themselves? Did you have a hard time figuring out who you wanted to talk to?
I don't think so. I don't think it was really hard to figure out who to talk to. I kind of just took a look back over the people that I've worked with in wellness over the years, and there were two people that really stuck out to me. But the main thing they had in common was that, well, I'll focus on one person. I was her personal trainer for 2.5 years with her and her husband. They were both, ideal clients. She lost 60 pounds, was featured on the company's website, receiving all this praise and stuff. Then after I had another job opportunity come up, and so I left that company, and I got in contact with this lady a few months after I left, and she told me that she had put all the weight back on, that she lost all the habits she had, and I realized that she was relying too much on me to get those results. And so it kind of bothered me. Like I felt like I didn't accomplish what I set out to accomplish. And so I kind of used that to drive my customer lens. The people that may have tried different physical fitness programs or just living a healthier lifestyle, but maybe didn't quite get that lifestyle change. It maybe had it for the short term. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of kept those people in mind as I was developing my customer lens. And then when I started interviewing people too, that also helped out a lot with getting more detailed and really understanding my customer a lot better. And so in getting that on my customer lens was a huge help, especially when I had it up in my physical space. Some of the interviews were just casual. Like I was having lunch with someone, I'd start asking them questions, and I'd get some good information from them. And so when I get home that night, I'd throw it up on my customer lens, and just developing it that way really, I think, helped me out a lot in my ultimate goal.
So you did some of your interviewing just sort of extemporaneously, but did you plan your questions ahead, or did you just wing it when you went in to visit with someone?
So one thing that I did, I actually listened to a podcast a little while ago. I forgot the guy's name, but he's a phenomenal interviewer, and people love to be interviewed by him. And so he kind of gave a few of his techniques. And one of the techniques that he gave is that he said he would sit down and he'd write out 100 questions that he'd plan to ask, and he would just go over them and really understand the questions, but then he would leave those questions outside. So he had them inside his head, but when he actually got into the interview, he felt like he was able to make the people feel more comfortable, and he was able to sit down with them and have a good quality conversation with them, but then kind of guide the conversation as they needed it. Because when I started thinking about it, I feel like, at least at times when I've been interviewed, I feel a lot more comfortable and more open with people when I'm having a conversation, when they're not holding up a piece of paper and saying, okay, question 1, check, question 2, check. I feel like when people are comfortable, we're going to get better quality information out of them. And so that's what I would do when I would sit down, when I actually had those scheduled interview times, that I would kind of take that approach. I'd write out questions, but then I'd just keep them in mind and then just have a conversation with them. And I felt like at least the people I interviewed were much more open than I thought they would have been going into the interview.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. So we won't spend any time on the top part because we'll be getting to that later in our sequence here. But in the middle is the people that is the part where you sort of define who this person is, and you put down facts about them, values, and then you've got some great areas that you've concentrated on down below, needs, emotional needs, and what have you. Can you talk a little bit about what kinds of questions you use to get at some of these?
Yeah, I mean, the question I usually start off with is, what do you value? And so, it was funny because I originally thought that the things that people would tell me that they value, at least when they're talking to me and they know my history at working in fitness and wellness, that I thought that they would usually say, oh, that, you know, I value good health, or I value looking good and things like that. But really, when I had a good conversation with people, the values part of it ended up becoming more of they value time with their family. They value time with their friends. And but the funny thing was with the values part of the customer lens, that these were things that kind of came out of that too. So family was the big one that was across the board with everyone that I didn't really expect to see, but I ended up seeing with everybody, is that their family, they value time with their family. And then the other things kind of came off of that, like you know, fitness, having fun, happiness, better quality of life. It all kind of revolved around that. That's kind of how I ended up with the values part of it.
Sure.
And
So
oh,
I'm
sorry.
sure well, I was just going to say, I'm sure you talked about needs and things that they were wanting. How did you transition into asking about emotional needs?
That's a good question. I think for the emotional side of it, once we got into the there with one person, once we got into the conversation, I just asked them pretty directly. Like once I felt like we were having just a casual conversation, they felt comfortable. I just asked them, you know, what do you really emotionally need? And so those are the things that I came up with, or the answers that a few of the people gave me were what I have listed on there, like a sense of accomplishment. I mean, the one lady I talked about earlier who I trained, that was the thing that she missed the most, was that sense of accomplishment, that being successful at what she was trying to do and having other people see that. It made her feel good about herself. And she missed that when that went away. And so I think a lot of it is just, you know, getting people comfortable and asking those questions. You know, what is your emotional need? Ask them directly. What is your pain? What limitations do you feel?
Did you see them, any of your interviewees, did they change when you started asking about emotional questions? Was there a difference in the way that they were answering questions?
Yeah, I mean, you can feel the vibes coming off people. You know, when you start asking deeper questions and more emotional questions, you can kind of see in their face, you know, what's really going on. So when I asked one lady, you know, what pain do you feel from these gaps that you're having in your life? And, you know, you can hear in her voice that the tone's different. And she said that one of the pain, or some of the pain that she's feeling is shame. And I think when you know you've hit that, you've really hit it. You've really hit that emotional need that you really need to understand. And that's where you can add value to your customer's life, is when you can reach that point with them.
So this gives you an overall look at a type of customer that you want. You've named her Laura, and you're able to, on one page, sort of summarize what they're all about, and you can continue to use this and add to it as time goes on. You get to know more and more Lauras and people who can add to this. What's your overall sense of lens building, Chris? Was it worth doing?
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the neat things for me to see was that, you know, from day one when I made my first customer lens, it's just improved upon. The more people I talk to, the more I learn. So the lens you see here it's similar to the one I started out with, but it's one of those things that I don't think you would ever stop revising. And I think it's one of those things that in order to progress your company in the long run, you need to understand your customer as they are now, but they might change over time. And so you need to stay on top of that and adapt with it as well too. So the customer lens is something that is an active document. It's always changing the more you learn.
Great. Any last bits of advice that you want to give to your fellow startup hustlers about customer lensing?
I think the big thing for me was don't underestimate the value of your physical space. It's such a huge thing to help me work through thought processes. But when I had my customer lens up, Like I have a giant, a big whiteboard in my office. So when I had my customer lens up there, I feel like I just kept revising it, or I'd have a conversation with someone that spark an idea for me to understand my customer better. So or when I get home, I'd write it on there, and just seeing it there and really understanding the customer lens, it's just such a huge benefit in the long run. I think it's just a very, very valuable tool to keep it in your physical space too.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that, and great job on doing the customer lens there.
Oh, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So let's talk about doing a sort of a practice interview, shall we? Dan was good enough to agree to, Dan from Hacker Lab was good enough to agree to be my practice interviewee. Dan, are you on?
Yes.
So let's do a practice interview. In real life, Dan happens to have a number of business interests, but one of them, he has a retail business with called Small Cakes. And just out of sense of demonstration here, we're going to put up this customer lens that you see, and then ask Dan questions about that specific part of his professional life, and use that as examples. So here's what I'd like to do is, as I interview Dan, imagine how you might handle this dialogue and questions to emote answers that would fall in these areas that are on the bottom part of your lens, okay? So I have set up a meeting ahead of time with Dan. I knew I wanted to talk with small business owners. I made a list of potential people that I could talk with, and I was lucky enough to find a business owner named Dan. I set up an appointment ahead of time, which is what we were asking everyone to start thinking about doing right off the bat with our welcome segment in our course. So that's how I came about meeting with Dan. We actually met near his business, but not in his business. We actually sat down over a cup of coffee, and this is the type of things that we would have said in a meeting like that. So Dan, thanks for meeting with me. I really appreciate it. Have you done an interview like this before?
No, I haven't.
Well, that's cool. Well, we're gonna, what we're doing is that we want to look at small businesses that have franchise agreements and how they impact the business's ability to grow. So what we need is fresh eyes on this, and we wanted to get your perspective, and we thought that that would be invaluable. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Well, what I want to start with is letting you know that what we're not doing is testing you or judging your business. We just want to understand this concept of franchised small businesses. So for starters, can you tell me a little bit about your business?
Sure. So Small Cakes is it's a national franchise. It's a cupcake franchise. Although in California, the franchise was unable to franchise, so license holders. That's just sort of a shade different. But basically, the bottom line is what that means in terms of typically with a franchise, you'll get sort of like a headquarters office where the franchise is supposed to or is sold as an entity that does your national marketing for you, tells you how to set everything up, has everything themed out so that basically you as the franchisee can just kind of take a business out of the box and start running.
Mm-hmm.
So in a licensing model, that's a little different. The licensing model is basically you get to use the name.
Yeah.
That's it.
Sure.
So,
So could you tell us a little bit about, as an owner, what sorts of duties do you have? What do you do on a daily basis as an owner of small cakes business?
Well, I sit back and let everybody else do the work, which is why I'm not successful. I'm just kidding. So my duties, basically, I would like to actually recognize my wife because she actually does 95% of all the duties. So I could talk about her. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be great.
She supports my habit of being addicted to startup life. So, okay, so what she does is there's a couple of big things that she does. So we have to manage cash flow because we have ingredients that has to come together, make a product, and then we sell it later. There's all kinds of different like time lags between when you actually spend money on something, you get the products in, you mix it together, and then you send it out the door. So every item has got a different time lag on it. So labor usually runs about 2 weeks late. Sometimes our food vendors charge us the day of. If we're lucky, we're getting invoiced net 30, although that's seldom. So one of her main things is that we found is cost tracking is a very important part of what she does, and it's one of those you can't. It's one of those have tos, not need to, or not. It's a non-negotiable. So the other thing that she does is so we have 3 stores. Each of the stores are about 7 to 10 minutes apart, and she cross levels materials. So basically, if one store needs frosting, rather than order it or try to go to the store to buy it, she'll take it from one store to give to the other. It all depends on sales and what's happening and what the production schedule looks like. So she runs a lot of logistics, and she buys a lot of the perishables at Sam's Club, actually. So a lot of the berries, a lot of the frozen yogurt toppings, etc. She also manages in the employee schedules, and because we have mostly part-time folks across 3 locations, some of them are high school folks, other Sierra College folks, or other community college folks, and they're not always available all the time. So she does a lot of schedule juggling.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so those are, apart from visiting each store almost every day and providing leadership, basically teaching. That's one of the key things that she does when she's physically on site. It's not necessarily making sure that the counters are clean or making sure that there's only 2 ounces of frosting on each cupcake. It's teaching the employees what's expected, teaching them how to think about the business in terms of sales to production, so we're minimizing waste, and then teaching employees how to teach other employees.
Sure. So I'd like to know a little bit about what it feels like to be a franchise business owner. Can you tell us like what's the best part of being a business owner in this business?
Let's see the best part. Figuring shit out is the best part. For me personally, it's going into a problem that's unknown, where the answer is unknown, and then discovering the problem by trying different things. It's okay to deduce problems, but when you discover them by asking people what the deal is, but basically you discover through behavior. So I'll put an example on this. So we sell cupcakes. Sometimes Maria will come up with she'll dream of a different flavor cupcake. Like literally, she'll come up with it in her sleep. And she'll make it. Or she'll get one of our folks to make it. And we're not really sure if it would be a good flavor or not. We can kind of guess if it's good. but we don't know until it actually moves off the shelf. So that's interesting, because what we find is a lot of times what we think is good isn't necessarily the bee's knees. It's just an idea that we have.
Yeah, cool.
Um,
So Dan, what's that feel like when you're able to solve problems? How would you describe
feels like it feels good. It feels like I'm accomplishing something, and it feels like we're nailing in part of the we're dialing in part of the answer. So I would kind of say it kind of feels like making something cool with Legos.
Mhm.
Like when you actually build something and you look at it and you're like, all right, we know this for sure. It's sort of like looking at a really nice box that you designed with Legos or something kind of cool that you built. You can look at it and say, all right, we did something right.
So let's talk about the opposite side of that. What would you say is the worst part of owning a franchise business?
How freaking long it takes to become profitable.
Mm-hmm.
That's the worst part, man. That is the worst part. It takes a long time. Well, it's not only that, but it's dialing in the finances. We could say, oh yeah, we're going to predict that these customers come in the door on this particular day, and because it's a holiday or whatever, we're never right. And that's one thing I can actually assure everyone on our team is the only thing that you know is that you don't know. And what I mean by that, let's say, for example, let's take Valentine's Day for an example. Valentine's Day is typically our season kickoff, meaning we've made it through the winter. The winter, sales kind of dip. That's just a natural part of the sales cycle. But Valentine's Day is when folks, the New Year's resolutions have shook off. People are okay eating sugar again, and there's lots of significant others purchasing cupcakes for other people. So in the past, we've had blockbuster sales on the 13th and the 14th of February. This year, we were prepping our employees, and we were saying, oh yeah, it's going to get crazy and all this other kind of stuff. And it happened that Valentine's Day fell on a Sunday, so we were anticipating, okay, Thursday, Friday, Saturday would probably be really, really busy, like buckle up. And what happened was it wasn't. We still made the same amount of sales that we had thought we were going to make, but it was stretched over a longer period of time. So what's frustrating is that I can never predict daily behavior of the customers, no matter what kind of data I have, because it changes all the time. So that's a little frustrating.
I was just going to ask that must feel frustrating. Is it something that do you feel frustrated a lot? I mean, is this like every week there's frustrating parts, or how does that work for you?
Well, honestly, it got so frustrating that I was like, I'm giving up. I'm just gonna roll with it. And every chance I get, I tell our folks, don't expect anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of gave up on that.
You gave up on predicting volume.
Yeah. And so, I linked a little bit at first to a feeling of hubris, kind of saying, well, I should know my customers and everything, and I should know when they're doing this and when they're doing that. But I gave up because I said to myself, look, man, it doesn't matter what you think or how smart you think you are. People are going to do what they do. So stop it.
So Dan, I wanted to zero in on this sense of franchise. What in your mind is their responsibility to a store, to a set of stores like yours? What should they be doing?
So, in my opinion, it should be called a disenfranchise, not a franchise. If I could do it all over again, I would say run the hell away from franchises because, well, here's what they sell you out of the gate. They say, hey, we got this business in a box. It's proven. We've dialed it in. We know your customer. We know this. We know that. You'll get national advertising with us. We'll get they send you something called an FDD, which is a franchise disclosure agreement or disclosure document. In there, they say, oh yeah, this is, how much money all the stores did and across the United States. And what they do is they give you gross sales. They don't give you net sales, and they're not allowed to give you net sales. They have to give you gross sales. So there's no way for you to tell unless you've actually done it before what you're going to net. So a franchise will tell you that they basically do everything for you.
Mm-hmm. But you don't feel they do?
Absolutely not. I feel that, if I were to put it crassly, I would call franchisers liars and thieves. And so that's my own experience. And I don't think that, I don't think that my experience means that everybody else is like that. Although we kind of did do our homework a little bit, and a lot of the franchises that we looked at kind of did, they kind of all pitched the same thing, which is business in a box. We'll do your national advertising, and it sounds real good for a 49er just new to California.
Yeah.
It sounds great. But
so Dan, what if you were to sort of wave a magic wand and the franchise suddenly wanted to be more helpful to you, what would they have to do?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what they would do. And this is 4 years of going through this. So what a franchise would do is they would take my website, they would take the local market that they claim to know, and they would handle my local marketing. Now, a lot of times franchises say, "Oh, your job is the local marketing," but for somebody that's new to a retail type setup in a residential area or otherwise, there's a lot of trial and error there.
Mm-hmm.
So a franchise that was actually worth what they said they were worth would make sure that my website was taken care of, and not just a page, like a full site, a site that was that was optimized properly. It would publish Google ads for me, Facebook ads for me. Now, that granted, those are channels that are specific to my customers that we discovered, but they would handle that. I could go out and do business development as the person on the ground, and that's fine. But that I would say, look, you're not gonna make me like you unless you do this.
Sure. Well, thanks, Dan. I'm going to step out of character here, and thank you for letting me do the interview with you here. And how I would wrap this up, first of all, as you can kind of tell, this is a lot longer conversation. We've had this conversation for a little over 15 minutes, and what we probably in real life would have is a conversation that probably would last closer to 45 minutes, because I would have explored more about the co-ownership with Dan and his wife. I would have explored a little bit more about the functional things that they were doing. He did share some of those with us. And the fascinating part was the emotional needs and the things that came up. And I'm hoping that you saw a lot of this, that they're not only emotionals, but also pain points and Dan's bias about franchises. Did you hear those? Did you hear about the roles that they play, or that Dan plays? I'm sure you did. Issues came up. So what I would be doing is I'd be jotting a few notes down during this interview, but really quickly, when I got back to a computer, I'd be unloading on this customer lens and putting information down. And really, as I talked about at the beginning, not spending any time on evaluating or judging what Dan had to say. It brought up all sorts of interesting questions that I could be asking other customers, or maybe even following up with Dan. So I hope that's a quick example for you about what a customer lens interview feels like. And Chris, I'm thinking that maybe some of these questions would have felt similar to things that you might have asked. So thanks for letting me share that part of that interview with you. So I'm hoping that you have some questions, and if you want to throw them on to the chat, we can talk about things that we just went over.
So yeah, Paul, I captured 4 or 5 that people chatted, and if you have more, just pop them in. So again, this is Craig. So I'm going to start with a question about how many customer lenses. So there's 4 or 5 questions if you were watching the chat about, do I do 1 customer lens? Do I do 1 for each customer that I have? And this is a bit of tricky management. You can start off, you're trying to figure out the personas that you have. So you start off with 1 customer lens, and then if you find that, when I'm interviewing Dan and Chris, and they're wildly different, then I can standardize a customer lens for a persona. There are 2 ways to think about this. One of them comes from what are the personas that you need to do, and you'll put a lens and then figure out the values and the I'll go ahead and move back to the blank customer lens, the facts, values, and the persona, and then figure out the needs. Now, we've had many people who split them, so they figure out that what they thought was one sort of uniform persona, they needed to split into the customer lenses into 2. So things like somebody who's going to pay that's different than somebody who's going to who's your strategic design target. Those are different customers, and so you would have a different customer lens for those. And managing customer lenses is a little bit hard. Managing the different personas that you're going to target is hard, because when you do many customer interviews, then you may have to consolidate some just so that you can think. So when you're just starting out, you have 5 or 6 customers. You can fill one out for each, and then take the relevant facts, put them, group the people, and create a persona out of them. Paul or Dan or Eric, do you want to add to that?
No.
The most important thing about that is that you understand the emotional needs, and you can relate to it, and you understand the biases and the pain, and you can relate to it. It'll change the way you think about your customers. So group them the way it makes it easier for you to think about. And we did have a response back from one of the teams about, they thought through the different kinds of people and created different that might touch their product, and created similar personalities or personas. This is sort of a top-down, persona-down set of customer lens. If you do that, that's awesome. But if you find something that doesn't match your persona, just treat it like a different lens. Next question. I'll leave this one for Paul. I was thinking of recording my interviews so that I could go back and reference them. Are there any objections or considerations that I should think about?
Great question. The only one that I would encourage you to do is before you start recording it, ask the customer if it's okay. And if you have any sense at all that they're uncomfortable about it, then just don't do it. Be sure to tell them what you're going to use it for. You're just using it to create notes and to do a good job giving or recording what they said. And I don't know. I guess I've done that a number of times, and I've never had anyone say that it wasn't okay, because they had the sense that what they're doing is important and that they're helping us create a better understanding of whatever it was that I was talking about at the time.
So the one caution I would give is make sure that it's a safe place for them, that they know exactly what will happen with them and that you'll destroy them after you get done collecting your notes. And you just got to make sure it's a safe place. It could be that because they're being recorded, if they remember they're being recorded, like if you set it out in the middle so they can see it, when you touch on an emotional need, they may not break down. Usually what happens when you relate to them on an emotional need is they kind of change their tone. You could actually see Dan do it when Paul related to him on an emotional need and understood his frustration. He stammered a little bit. He changed his tone. It was either higher, or you could hear the tension in his tone, in his tone. And we knew that control and help from them was an emotional need that we could touch on. So that's just the one caution I would have. So is it okay to do an interview and then come back and look at the values list and the emotional needs and the biases lists that we give you, and then figure it out, instead of having to remember all of them and then design questions for them? And the answer is absolutely. So kind of like Chris said, you design your conversation, and then you just freewheel it from there. So you would have listed out a bunch of questions you wanted to ask, and then you go in not reading from them, but you kind of freewheel it and know what you're going to touch on. And then you just listen. It's more about listening than it is about telling. It's more about receptive than it is assertive. So listen, and then go back and jam them out on your physical space, or as Paul said, hammer them into your computer right away. I'll give you an example. An emotional need. We worked with one team who had to do something with blind people, and after they tapped into the emotional needs, they became on a mission. And when they were in front of their investors, they I tell you what, I was with them, and I about cried when they tapped into the emotional needs about that particular customer. So those things are so powerful, even in getting investors. Next question. Would you please address the customer difference between advertising merchants and the users who I'm actually targeting? Answer is yes, we will. But you'll have to bear with us just a little bit. In week 4, in week 3, you're going to go through and that's next week, you're going to go through and you're going to identify the different kinds of customers and the relationship between them. And in week 4, you're going to discover your business using that. The week 3 is we're building a thing called a customer universe. And in week 4, you'll identify which one of these are your strategic business target versus your strategic design target. So in this particular question, I think the advertisers will be your strategic business target, and your users are going to be your strategic design target. So you'll design your page to drive traffic, and then you'll monitor your statistics and your success measures like click-through rates, and then that'll drive business from your strategic business target. So there are many things. This question's a little bit more in detail, which we might take up with a mentor. But what actually drives the merchants to want to advertise with you? And we'll take that up with the mentor. But the big answer is views, eyeballs, displays, traffic, and there's many other things, but those are the big ones. So that's that question. There is a question for Chris. And the question is, what do you have, a huge physical space? Do you have whiteboards all over your office? And, go ahead, Chris, and I'll tell you guys what Paul and I both do.
Okay. So yeah, I can kind of pan around a little bit. So here's my office, guys. I got a giant whiteboard on that side, and I got another one right there. And so that's where I keep my physical space. It's just all around this whole room. So, and
So
the more physical space, the merrier, I think, too, with that.
So what we typically do is we put physical space whiteboards everywhere. And in my particular office, you can see, if you're looking at my video feed, you can see I want to go play some golf here. But this is on one of my whiteboards. And I think I have 9 or 10 of these. These are about $6 from Home Depot. And just take and drill a little hole, 2 holes, so I can hang them up on some nails. So I've got some screws, and I just move them all around my office. And there's about, I don't know, 9 or 10 or I don't know, that many in my office. And I pop one up, and sometimes I'll put them up over there just to see if I can get anybody to play golf with me. Let me see if there's any last minute questions here. So when you do a focus group type interview, any tips on influencing the interviews to not follow the pack, given the non-biased thoughts? Paul, do you want to try that one before I do?
Well, sure. The thing that I want to talk about with that is that I'm not a big fan of focus groups. You might have a reason to do them. They are being done less and less these days for that very reason. It creates bias, and you're going to get information that's based on. I don't mean to make this sound disrespectful, but you're going to get information based on the noisiest 2 or 3 people in the room, and that's not always useful. So, in the sense that you're trying to make your time as efficient as possible and get good information, I try to avoid it. They still do them, people still, there might be applications, but not very many.
Any other last questions? Eric, you want to give us an idea what's happening on Thursday?
Yeah, cool. Right on. That was fun. Thanks, Paul. So for the rest of the week, tomorrow, Wednesday, open co-working at both facilities. And then you can meet with either Dan or myself. I'll be in Rockland and Dan will be in Midtown, and we'll be available starting around 1 to 3 p.m. But come in for open co-working and hang out, and that'll be a good time. And then Thursday, our mentor panel is in Rockland at 6 o'clock, and we've got some great mentors on the panel. And the theme for that discussion will be, how has your business changed? And that'll be a fun time. And I guess one more thought is, the Trello board. We can help. It's an efficient tool for us to collaborate together. So use the Trello board. We get those updates, and you can pop questions in there. And that'll be good. And the LMS, go through the LMS videos. We released week 2. And just so you know, we can tell how many people are watching the videos, and we know who's watching the videos. Watch the videos. So we know that you know what we're trying to tell you and the concepts we're trying to get across. They're really quick. They're designed to be quick tidbits of information. So you can go through week 2 in literally about 30 minutes and watch those videos and start filling out those customer lenses and getting those interviews. So that's it from me. Some questions here as we go.
This is Paul. I just wanted to tell Chris and Dan thanks for letting us talk about customers with them.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. I'll send out the list of the mentors in a meeting, a calendar invite tomorrow. So it'll be good. And this will be recorded. This has been recorded, and so that will be posted on the LMS. And then I think Natalie has a good question that I was asking as well, is can we get a copy of Chris's customer lens? So I think we can do that also, and it'll also be in the recording. But so yes, that'll be available.
I'll throw, I'm going to put the PowerPoint slides out on the LMS. So it'll be there for you.
Cool.
If that's okay with you, Chris.
Cool.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
I think the last thing is that the last ask is get on the LMS and introduce yourself also, and you can post on there if you're looking for types of customer introductions. You can post them on there and crowdsource that amongst the community. So, all right, that concludes our week 2 conference call. Thank you, everybody, and see you on Thursday.
Thanks, Eric.